Hello, everyone. Welcome to Focus Friday. My name is Todd Crandall, and I am a member of the adjunct faculty here at the Huntsman School, and really excited to be hosting today's session. Here with Heidi Melin. Heidi, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
You are very welcome. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So thank you for being such a strong supporter of the Huntsman School in Utah State. We really appreciate that, and we're honored to have you join us. So had a chance to talk with you earlier and look over your background, get a feel. You've got a really fascinating background. You worked for a lot of successful high-tech companies in Silicon Valley as a chief marketing officer, and now at one of Utah's most successful businesses as well, here at Workfront. So maybe let's just get started with just a little bit of a background on Workfront and what Workfront does, what industry is it in, and then maybe a little bit about your role as a CMO there.
Absolutely. So I've been part of the Workfront team for the last 2.5 years. Workfront's an enterprise work management platform that really helps people and organizations do their best work, aligning, planning, managing, and measuring work inside their organizations. And so I had been a customer of Workfront prior to joining the organization. And so it was a great fit because I was passionate about the product and about the problem that the product solves. And so as a CMO, managing work is what we do. And so I had seen the power of Workfront inside of the company that I brought Workfront into. And so when I had the opportunity to join the Workfront team as the CMO, I jumped on it right away because I understood the product, I understood the business challenge that the product solves, and I was excited about the brand. And so as the CMO of Workfront, I lead our go-to-market efforts, driving pipeline, driving awareness for the business, and also creating loyal customers and advocates that can tell not only their story, but the Workfront story. And so those are my primary areas where I focus in on. A lot of my time is spent in working with our field sales organization, as well as our customer experience teams, and love being part of the Workfront team.
That's great. That's so, I imagine an integrated agile enterprise, work management workflow is probably a pretty good product for the pandemic period that we're in. Can you talk about that? How are you doing during this period?
Yeah, so when you think about how companies have been transforming, going through digital transformation processes, COVID really taught us that digital transformation shouldn't just be a priority, but should be the priority of the business, because overnight we all had to deal with how do we get our jobs done? How does work progress within the organization when we're not physically in the same location, and we're crossing geographic boundaries, and we're also having to deal with challenges that we've never had before. And those businesses that were ahead of the curve on digital transformation were ahead of the curve in understanding the work processes inside their companies. We're the companies that have navigated this pandemic much more successfully. We hear from customers all the time that if it weren't for Workfront storing, managing, and helping them have visibility into the work going on inside their businesses, they would not have been able to pivot as quickly during the pandemic. So we've certainly seen it as an opportunity, not only from a success standpoint to tell some of those stories. We have customers that are on the front lines of fighting the pandemic. Companies like Covance, for example, that has been managing all of their trials, their clinical trials for things like vaccines.
Yeah.
Using the Workfront platform to manage that. It's really invigorating to know that we're having our products and our platform is having an impact on companies that are on the front line. But it's also been great for business because companies now are thinking differently about their need to transform inside how they get work done.
Yeah, good for you. And what industries are you strongest in? Where do you focus?
So we tend to focus from a buying center perspective, we have a lot of customers that are in the marketing realm because it's very project-based work that requires review and approvals, proofing, a lot of handoffs between systems. And so we have a lot of customers that are in marketing departments across almost every industry that you can possibly think of. We also have IT organizations, for example, that have to manage large scale programs and projects. And that we have a lot of customers, again, cross industry. We also do very well in industries that are highly regulated. So when you think about financial services or insurance, specifically banking, where there's a lot of compliance and you need to record, review, and approve and audit your approval processes for the work going on inside your organization, we do very well in those types of organizations as well.
That's great. Well, so you kind of lived through a very successful Silicon Valley, career and did really well there and saw the growth there of the Silicon Valley. Now working on what we call Silicon Slopes, right?
Yep.
So we think about it a lot here in Utah. What does tech in Utah really feel like? It's exploded, recently. Is that here to stay? And maybe what attracted you to work with Workfront, here in the Utah area?
Couple of things, really, from a technology standpoint, to look at the types of technology businesses that are thriving in the Silicon Slopes corridor is amazing. And to see the growth, I mean, you physically can see the growth as you drive down 15 between Lehigh and Provo. And it's great to see not only the presence of growth-oriented startup businesses, but also some of the large-scale technology leaders, and whether that's Adobe, whether that's Oracle or SAP as examples. And so having spent the bulk of my career in the Silicon Valley area, I'm very familiar with technology and also the challenges that brings. Attracting talent, for example. Attracting talent in the San Francisco Bay Area is challenging. And when you think about access to talent in the Utah area, and specifically in Silicon Slopes, it's great access to very well-educated talent, all of which you guys are focused on. And so to me, it is definitely here to stay. I think that it is a great place to incubate new ideas and new businesses. And part of the reason I was sharing earlier that my commute to Salt Lake or to the Lehigh area is actually sometimes easier than a physical commute here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's been a great way for me to learn a little bit more about the Utah community and to be engaged and involved in what's going on with Silicon Slopes. I think it's absolutely here to stay. It's going to continue to grow, especially with the access to the kind of talent that is in the state of Utah.
We love to hear it. We love to hear it. We love the growth until it gets really packed in that little corridor. Hopefully the construction clears things up a little bit later.
Yeah.
So when someone looks at your successful career and they're sitting here, we have many students here that are thinking, how do I get there? I'm sure that when you were back in their, shoes at Willamette and thinking about, what am I going to do in my career? This is exactly what you were picturing, right? You were picturing you were going to be a chief marketing officer, at Workfront and all these successful companies, or was it a different story? What was your path to where you went or where you are?
It was definitely a different story. So as you mentioned, I went to Willamette University in Salem, Oregon, and had a very liberal arts basis education. So I majored in, of all things, political science and German. Now, if any of you are German speakers out there, I do not continue to speak German. I can get by when traveling, but that's about it.
Well, that sure would have helped me at SAP if I would have known German. Yeah.
Absolutely. Although if you don't keep those things up, they go pretty quickly. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I spent a year as a consultant for a national sorority organization where I got to learn a lot about not only business practices, but a broader view of the nonprofit communities. And really as a consultant and as a business consultant, not only looking at accounting practices as an example, but also looking at business process inside an organization, and also the impact of social issues inside of college campuses. And so it was a great opportunity for me to be more thoughtful about what I wanted to do next. And that time was really important to me. And what I realized is that I wanted to have access to a lot of different businesses before I focused my efforts on anything specific. And what I chose is I chose a path with an advertising agency, which gave me access to some of the biggest technology companies in the Silicon Valley area. And at that time, it was less cool to be working on a technology account. It was much more cool to be working on a consumer brand. But I actually thrived with technology, not because I'm technical by nature. I'm not an engineer, but by training. But I do understand the benefits of technology and what technology brings into a large enterprise, for example. And so I did thrive in doing that and spent a good portion of my career on the advertising agency side with exposure to a lot of different companies. And then finally made the decision to move corporate side, if you will, and took a full-time role on a marketing team with a company that was emerging in the software industry, a company called PeopleSoft. And I spent 10 years, almost 10 years at PeopleSoft. And that was really the bulk of my corporate experience. And I would encourage students to look at opportunities early in your career to get exposure to more than one business. And consulting opportunities allow you to do that. Agency opportunities allow you to do that. And it is certainly something that I think benefited me foundationally.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think, consulting, any kind of an agency gives you exposure to different strategies, different problems to solve, and really different business models that you can see across the whole landscape, and it gives some perspective. So you chose to then continue to pursue the technology area, through your whole career. And
Yep.
and I would say, I think you sold 3 different companies to Oracle over that path? Four. Sorry, I missed that. Yeah.
So I have had the opportunity to be involved in some pretty significant acquisitions. PeopleSoft was acquired by Oracle. The next stop on my career path was a company called Hyperion in business planning and business intelligence. And that company was acquired by Oracle. I continued. I spent a number of years at Polycom and then went to an emerging company in the talent management space called Taleo, which was then acquired by Oracle.
Yeah.
And my latest acquisition by Oracle was Eloqua, so in the marketing automation space. That is not the plan for Workfront. It is a great experience having gone through those transitions and participated in those integrations, but not the plan for Workfront.
But never have worked at Oracle, it sounds like, though.
I have never worked at Oracle. I always took the opportunity to move on to the next thing from an emerging technology standpoint. One of the things that I realized after my PeopleSoft experience is I really loved that category creation challenge. And really that's where Workfront is, in creating a work management category that hasn't existed before. And so that's where I've tended to focus my efforts on those companies that most recently are in software as a service and have emerging platforms and categories that they're investing in. And I love that part. It's my favorite part of my job.
And you've done it really well. You've done it very well. So in a role as a chief marketing officer, or really let's just say the marketing organization, I mean, some people think that it's just a distinct organization. It doesn't really interact much with the rest of the company. It's really just in charge of branding and, some, activities, events, those types of things. And of course we know that's not true, but in our conversation, you really, I think, emphasized the integration to other parts of the organization. We talked about sales and marketing. I imagine that also works on the kind of product development, product management side of the house as well. Can you maybe talk about how do you do that? How do you make sure that marketing is an integrated function across the whole business?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is so powerful about opportunities in marketing today that wasn't true 15, 20 years ago is the seat at the table that a chief marketing officer, a marketing leader has in helping to define the company's strategy. It's not just about branding. Branding is an important component of it, but it's about messaging, it's about positioning. In some cases, it's about category creation. Understanding the product and the business problem that the product solves is a really important intersection between marketing and product development. Then, when you think about the integration with sales, I believe that marketing and selling are actually part of one business process, and that's a revenue creation business process. And today, the technology that we have to support that entire continuum from creating interest all the way through to closing an opportunity or selling something to a prospective customer is supported by technology, infrastructure, and business process that we've never had before. And the interplay between the marketing function and the sales function has never been more important than it is today. When you think of automation, when you think of how businesses are transforming from a digital perspective to digital communications, digital marketing practices, the sales and marketing functions are starting to blur. And it's about revenue creation.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true. I mean, more people are researching online before they ever talk to the first salesperson, right? And
Yep.
and certainly continuing that research, and you have to make sure there's an integration there. When we spoke, we talked about you kind of identified one of the inflection points, which, by the way, I love that term.
Mm-hmm.
From old Andy. I don't know if you got that from Andy
Yep.
Grove, but that's
Yep.
where I remember
Yep.
it. But that's that inflection point for you at the time was more enterprise software to the cloud. You identified that as a trend, which has worked out well for you.
Yep.
When we look at inflection points now, what do you see? What's happening? And certainly, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and that might be changing some things as well. What do you see the next inflection point to be, or are we there already? Did it already happen?
Well, I think we're definitely in the midst of it. When I step back and we all look at 2020 we all have an interesting lens on 2020, given everything that has happened, but it has completely changed how enterprise software, in my case, is being marketed and sold overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact that a traditional marketing and selling process, whether that be going to large scale events and demonstrating our products and selling in person, spending time in person at customers' offices, all of that went away overnight. And we all had to think differently about how we go to market. And so it's an inflection point for sure. And it is spawning new industries, it's spawning new technologies, it's having us all think differently about how we get our job done. Part of my job is really to drive demand and pipeline for our business. And the way in which I do that literally changed in March 2020. And adjusting to that and ensuring that we have the right skill sets, folks that can think expansively about doing things differently versus doing things in a traditional fashion. Many of those traditional channels went away overnight. And so, looking for the ability to be more agile as businesses and as marketing teams, like if we've learned nothing else, being agile is probably the most important thing that every marketing person learned in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an advantage for those entering the workforce now, because I think for someone who's been in the workforce for a long time, unlearning sometimes is difficult. Having done it the same way for
Yep.
many years is a disadvantage now,
Yep.
because you're kind of expecting it to operate, businesses to operate in the same function or interact with you in the same way. Those entering the workforce don't have those preconceived notions and can just jump right in.
Yeah.
You published a really interesting article or a post on LinkedIn, which I thought was really interesting. It was called to my 20-something entering the workforce, mom really does know best. I think you've got two 20-somethings out in the workforce now, right?
I do.
So, but I wanted to dig into some of the things you mentioned there, if that's okay.
Yep.
Because I thought it was really interesting. And I think it would be good for our students to hear this as well. And by the way, students, anybody who's got questions, feel free to post them into YouTube, and they're going to navigate their way to me, and I can ask Heidi when we finish up today. But you talked about networking. And we certainly live in in an environment where we have to network to be successful in business, but you had a little bit of a different take on what networking really means. So maybe, do you want to describe that to us?
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn, tremendous fan. I think LinkedIn makes networking so much easier and seamless, and takes the friction out of networking. However, it's not just about your LinkedIn network. It's about the relationships that you develop and nurture over time. And those people that are the most successful at leveraging their networks are not just the people with the largest number of connections on LinkedIn. It's about how you nurture those relationships. And I actually, in that article, I shared a personal story where I've had the benefit for the last 3 roles that I've been in to work with CEOs that I've worked with before. And that's because I've nurtured those relationships. And in fact, one of the opportunities that I had when I moved from Polycom to Taleo, the reason why I moved is because there was this new thing that was emerging at the time, and it was called software as a service. And I knew someone from a previous business that it was smack dab in the middle of the SaaS revolution. And I invited him out for coffee and said, will you tell me what I need to know about software as a service, and why is it important, and how do you see it? And out of that, he hired me as the CMO of Taleo. And that was because I nurtured a relationship. And it wasn't just about having a connection on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's really important. It's a great tool, but the personal relationships and how you nurture those over time is really important.
Yeah. How do you take that even to the next step? I mean, what's your view on mentors? Yes, or those that you really kind of help you navigate your career, over and between companies. It sounds like you might have had one if you followed a CEO for a while, but maybe that wasn't your mentor. But what is the role of a mentor from your perspective?
Yeah, I think there's formal roles for mentors, and I certainly have some formal mentors that I've had over the years, but I also have informal mentors, people that if I have a question or I have a challenge that I'm struggling with, I'll reach out to that individual because they might have a different lens. And so I'm a huge believer in formal mentor programs. I actually support a number of folks on the Workfront team with formal mentor relationships. But I also support those informal ones, and leveraging those relationships that you have that can provide perhaps a different lens, a different way of thinking, a alternative view that helps you shape a path forward. And so I turn to those people all the time. And so I don't have one mentor or 2 mentors. I have lots of mentors that I'll turn to and ask for advice.
What do you look for? I mean, if our students are listening today and thinking, okay, I know I need a mentor, but what should I be looking for? What does a good prospective mentor bring to me? What are the characteristics? How can you help them?
I would say first and foremost is a personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to have a shared understanding, a shared vision of how things work. And so that personal connection, I think, is really, really important. I think the professional experience, is there something that that you can learn from that individual? And perhaps is there something that they can learn from you too?
Yeah.
Because a mentor relationship is not just a one-way relationship. It's a two-way relationship. I've learned more from some of the folks that I've mentored over the years than from mentors that I have worked with personally. And so understanding the experience that you could leverage, and the interest and willingness to build a deeper relationship, to me, is the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned something. I think I was part of a reverse mentoring program where some of those that might be kind of more seasoned in their careers were being mentored by people just coming into the workforce because they had a different digital perspective.
Yep.
And it helps a lot, especially in high tech, to get some of the fresh, more consumerization ideas, into the business to help develop software differently, or, even go to market differently. Yeah.
Absolutely. We actually have an initiative going on right now at Workfront where we've pulled together some of the smartest folks on our teams that maybe aren't the most, have the most depth of experience, but have a different perspective and are coming at things from a unique vantage point and aren't encumbered by traditional ways of thinking.
Mhm.
And they're looking at how do we need to reimagine our revenue process, given everything with not just COVID, but how the world is evolving. And some of the thinking, some of the ideas that have come out of that initiative have been the most powerful ideas that I've seen, the most powerful innovation within the company. And they're not coming from the senior most executives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the senior most executives probably have already put their stamp on the ideas that are out there, right?
Yep.
That's what they promoted when they started, or over the years. Well, so the other thing I think is interesting about mentoring is I think that people are much more apt to be a mentor than people think. It's not. I think it's incredibly rewarding to be a mentor to someone that you see anxiously and curiously looking for new ways to expand their career, and that are willing to listen to what you have to say. I
Yep.
think it's interesting. That's great. One of the other things that you mentioned that in that article was taking risks, and that
Mhm.
you're not necessarily a natural
Mhm.
risk taker. So talk to me about that, because I'm sure many people identify with that as well. They're not likely to go, skydiving tomorrow, but
Right.
they still, want to, succeed in their careers. What would you say to them?
I would say don't be afraid to take a little bit of risk, and to lean outside your comfort zone. And the moment that you have an opportunity to do something that makes you just a little bit nervous, and you think, gosh, do I have everything I need to do this specific job, this specific role, tackle this specific challenge? The moment that you feel just a little bit nervous about it, you're going to grow. And I know there have been multiple times in my career where I felt that like, can I really do this? I remember vividly um, taking the opportunity to step into my first CMO role at a large technology business, and that was actually at Hyperion. And Hyperion was a very successful technology company, about 500 million in revenue, public. Um, and the CEO took a risk on me having not been a CMO before, but he saw something in me that I needed to have enough confidence to lean into. And that's scary. But you have to take those risks in order to grow.
No, I think so too. I think it is a little nerve wracking for those that aren't used to taking those kinds of risks and
Yep.
taking on a role that maybe they don't know how to do, but that's the only way you stretch, is
Yep.
by taking something you maybe is a little bit outside of what you had previously done. The other thing I thought was interesting in that article is you talked about people. I think you said hire people that are smarter than you. I
Mm,
think is what. So talk about that. How do you do that?
100%. So uh, I think actually that's why I've been successful is I have had the ability to hire people that have more depth of experience in certain areas than I do. And the moment that you start to think that you're the only person that has the depth of experience to get the job done is the moment that you start to fail. And so I think it's a really, from a leadership perspective, it's the smartest thing you can do is that when you understand where your personal gaps are, where you have depth, and hire to your weaknesses, you'll be successful. And so um, that's always been a mantra that I've had since I've hired anyone is to hire people smarter than me
Yeah.
and then support them. And my job as a leader becomes helping to support them, remove barriers, help provide a framework and a guidance from a strategy perspective, and to let them succeed versus micromanaging or uh, being this having to be the smartest person in the room because
Yeah.
it's not a recipe for success.
No, it's not. I love I've often said the hire up and listen up, right? So
Yeah.
hire people who know things that you don't know, and then listen to what they have to say. But often that's not what executives do. They want to they want to hire people and tell them what they need to go do. And that doesn't bring any new, fresh ideas into the process.
Yep.
So one of the other things that I think is interesting, is you've been highly successful and you've raised two great kids, right? And that we know that there aren't enough female executives in the workforce. And so I'm kind of curious, and we've got a lot of, females within our, within the Huntsman School, and we know they're going to be successful. But, the question always becomes, do you feel like you've experienced barriers along the way? And if so, how have you tackled those? And if not, how do you see the workplace evolving today?
From my standpoint, it's always been about balance. And I think that every parent has that constant challenge of how do you keep things balanced? I'm also a believer in the fact that perfect balance does not exist. It's something we're always striving and working towards. It's an active work. It's not a destination. And so, so when you take it in that context, as a working parent, as a working mom, there were trade-offs that I had to make along the way. Some of them were really hard. I share in the article, I missed my daughter's first day of kindergarten. She is a highly successful 24-year-old at this point. She's fine. And I was devastated by it. And I had people around me, my husband, my parents, the teachers that said, you know what, she's going to have a third day of kindergarten. Like, you can take her to her third day of kindergarten. And it's about understanding those trade-offs and giving yourself some grace to be able to make those trade-offs and actively balance. And I think all parents have to make those trade-off decisions, and there are hard days. I haven't necessarily had the kind of barriers. I haven't necessarily seen them. I'm sure they've been there, but I haven't paid attention to them. And from my standpoint, having been a senior executive at many businesses, I also serve on the board of a public company. I've seen actually doors open as long as I'm willing to walk through them and continue to make those balance trade-offs. And it's just different decisions you have to make along the way.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, I had a very successful, female CEO that I worked with, and I loved the perspective that she brought. It brings, honestly, I feel like the diversity that you bring into executive suites makes a big difference in the culture of a company.
Yeah.
And maybe talk to me a bit about the culture of Workfront. How has that been shaped, and how do you see it evolving, and how has that helped during maybe this COVID period that we've been in?
Yeah. So part of the reason why I joined Workfront is I really liked the culture of the business. I shared earlier that I was familiar with the products already. I had the opportunity to work with the CEO, Alex Shootman, before. So, so I knew the kind of organization that he was building, and the culture of Workfront is a really special one. It's certainly one that's tied closely to the community. But it's also a growing organization, and it's growing all over the world right now. And so it's been awesome to be a part of that. It's a very inclusive culture. It is the most diverse executive team that I've ever been a part of, and an extremely supportive environment as far as family life and creating that balance. We also, because our platform allows being able to work across geographic boundaries, we've also grown our team both inside Utah and outside Utah. And I'm certainly part of that, being a remote team member. And now we're all remote right now. So having those skills and that ability has been great. I think the culture of Workfront is also really extends into our customers, because one of our core values as a business is to obsess over our customers. And we live that, we breathe that every day. And it's about demonstrating our customer success, not necessarily our own. And that's something that everyone who works at Workfront really really strives for.
That's great. Culture makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we talked about this the other day, that you like to kind of put some of those types of things on your whiteboard, which we can't see because there's a little bit of glare there.
Glare.
So tell us what's there and why is it there?
So there's a couple of things. One is, as we've all struggled to migrate to this new normal and worked virtually, we've had a number of programs inside of Workfront to help us do that. And on the left side of my whiteboard is rediscover your strengths. So just a little reminder, like, there are things that we're all good at. There are also things that we're not as good at, and we tend to focus on the ones we're not as good at. Remember those things that you're really good at. The second is to block time and take a walk. I'm on video all day long, as are most of my coworkers, and you need to take time and take a walk, get some fresh air. The third is to relook at happy memories. The fact that we're not able to do all the things that we want to do, whether that's travel, spend time with family, go to concerts, take time to pause and say, gosh, those were great things that we did, and we'll do them again. And then minimize triggers. So looking at, it's stressful. We're all spending a lot more time at home, and minimize the triggers around you. On the right side of my whiteboard is really about problem solving. And we're investing in a program inside of Workfront to really give us more tools to solve problems. And it's basically the 5 steps to solve a problem. One is understand the problem, and you should spend about half of your time understanding the problem first, which isn't, as humans, what we normally do. We normally try and solve the problem, but taking the time to understand the problem is really important. Thinking expansively, that's the taking in all the ideas, then organizing the ideas, reducing those ideas, and finally to build consensus. But the most important thing for me, and the reminder and the reason why it's on my whiteboard, is understand the problem. We all want to solve the problem. Big things, little things, we all want to solve it. So we go immediately into problem solving mode. And sometimes you need to spend a little bit of time understanding what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think I've heard, sometimes to get the right answer, you have to make sure you're asking the right question.
Yep.
It's really about understanding the problem in the first place, right?
Yep.
So that's great. If we look at our students and they're saying, wow, Workfront is an amazing place, to work, what are you looking for in new recruits? What kind of functions, what kind of characteristics, talents, what do you see that kind of attracts you to some of the new people coming out of school today?
Absolutely, the ability to understand a digital environment. So when you think about bringing skills specifically, when you think of marketing, the world has changed essentially overnight, and our requirements on digital marketing practices, huge skills. I would also say the requirement to power that, because it's all really fancy to say digital marketing, but the requirement to power that is data.
Yeah.
So many people think of marketing, you alluded to it earlier, where it's about the brand, it's about what does the logo look like, and it's about pretty pictures, and sure, it's about all of those things, but today it's more about data than anything else. So having experience in data, understanding analytics and how to use data to provide insights, really important skill. I would also say the technology layer specifically for marketing is critical. Over the past 15 to 20 years, the technology to support marketing as a business practice has changed dramatically. The number of technologies that are available to us is overwhelming. And so those folks with a more technical background tend to do really, really, really well. And it's a bigger need than it's ever been before.
Yeah. So taking that a little bit further, if we looked at the specific technology skills, I mean, obviously, data analysis needs some tools, to be able to use. And obviously the tech platform that you're aggregating that data under, what technologies are you guys using today? And where would you like to see someone coming with skills in those areas?
So from a technology platform perspective at Workfront, we have our core enterprise platform, which is Salesforce.
Mhm.
We also leverage Marketo, which is an Adobe product,
Mhm.
as part of our core foundational platform. We leverage Workfront. We leverage Tableau. We also have about 35 to 40 other technologies that we leverage, including Adobe products, including point solutions for account-based marketing. Our technology stack is a complex one.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges that any company has today is the integration of those technologies, because it's not just about a point solution. It's about how do those technologies work together. You know that from your experience at SAP. And so the ability to understand not only a specific foundational technology, but how it connects and supports the business process is probably one of the most important skills.
Yeah, I completely agree. Figuring out how you aggregate that data to get the answers really becomes a challenge. So it sounds like having a broad-based skill set and being comfortable with technology is kind of a prerequisite in the environment that you're in.
Yep.
Okay, I mean, that makes complete sense. How about, I mean, clearly to make your products better and you mentioned that you had an advisory board with your customers. How do you get feedback from your customers to keep the evolution of your product going and to build relationships there as well that are relationships of empathy where they know you're listening to them in the process?
It's one of my favorite things about Workfront. I talked about the value of obsessing over our customers, and we really take that to all of our programs. The customer advisory board is made up of about 20 of some of the biggest and most recognizable brands on the planet, and some of the most innovative thought leaders in work management. And we think of our customer advisory board as a true advisory function into our business. We spend a lot more time listening than we do talking. We certainly share our plans going forward from a product roadmap standpoint, but we also listen to what their needs are and their challenges are. We don't exist without our customers.
Yeah.
And so finding those intersections to be able to listen and take ideas and understand the challenges that they have. We're developing relationships with customers at a level that is well beyond our product, but it's helping to shape where the industry is going. And so that to me is like the secret sauce. If you don't have that piece of it, you're missing it, because the moment that the technology company tries to understand, any technology company, Workfront or others, the moment that they're like, well, we're the smartest ones, we're going to tell you how to solve your problem, like that is not a recipe for success.
No.
And so, so listening to customers, understanding what their challenges are, is a really core component of our customer advisory board. And then taking that all the way through to engaging our customers in the product development process, and truly taking their feedback along the way allows for success as we introduce new products to the market.
Sure.
So it's built into the core fabric of the business.
Well, there's no better way to integrate them into your future technologies than involving them in it, right? And
exactly,
it certainly creates stickiness, to get them involved that way.
Exactly.
So I've got one more question, and we have a few more questions coming in that from the students that I wanted to pass along to you as well.
Okay.
You've been very successful in the progression from company to company, and been at a lot of companies.
Yep.
And I hear a lot of motivated, ambitious people who want to be in leadership roles, that they feel like they need to jump companies. They need to go from company to company to company to actually climb that ladder well. It's really hard to do from within an organization. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like if someone's aggressive and wanting to be in leadership roles, they need to move a lot, or can they do that from within a company if it's the right company?
If it's the right company, I think that you can absolutely do it within the company, but you also have to be really clear on what your career aspirations are. The thing that kills me is when maybe a employee comes to me and says, I'm going to go to XYZ company because I have an opportunity to grow. And I didn't already know that they wanted to grow, I'm like, oh, like we could have worked together on that.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you understand the opportunities within your current organization before you make a decision to go elsewhere, the grass will not be greener.
Yeah.
The challenge is, I mean, there's a reason why it's called work. If it was always just fun, we would call it fun. There are challenges with work environments, and it is really easy to think, oh, I can only grow if I go somewhere else. Make sure you explore all the opportunities in your current situation, um, and make sure your manager, your mentor, other leaders know that you want to grow and how you want to grow your career. You'll be surprised at what happens.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's great. And I think, as well, sometimes people think that a manager role means leader, but
Mhm.
really the definition of a leader is one that has followers, right? So if you have
Yep.
great ideas and people are following them, then guess what? You're a leader, even without the title,
Yep.
sometimes. Um,
Exactly.
so that's great. Okay. So our first question comes in from Taylor Paul. It says, what are your best tips on staying flexible and continuous learning as a marketer, even before COVID? I heard that SEO requires adaptivity.
Yeah. So that idea of being adaptable and agile is certainly a post-COVID lesson that all of us marketers learned. Um, but it's something that has to happen on an ongoing basis. One of the things that, in addition to learning from our customers that I just talked about, um, looking for industry best practices and doing best practices sharing with other organizations or with thought leaders in the industry is really important to me. And I think that we learn a ton from what other companies are doing, both mistakes that they've made that you don't want to repeat, but really spending time understanding best practices. One of my best examples that's most recent and a post-COVID one is many software companies have large user conferences where we bring in thousands of people into a physical location and we talk about our software and we give them insights into where we're going, and we have customers talk about how they've solved certain business problems. Um, Almost every software company has that program.
Yep.
Sapphire for SAP, for
Yep.
example.
Yep.
And all of a sudden that became impossible to do. And so we watched really carefully at how other companies like Adobe with the Adobe Summit, how they orchestrated a virtual event, and we all learned from each other.
Mhm.
And we learned from a number of conferences that happened before us. We applied some of that thinking, and it was a great opportunity for best practices sharing and learning on the fly. And that's something that I think all marketers need to be able to do. And so I'm a huge proponent of best practices sharing, as well as leveraging resources like Forrester or Gartner or Serious Decisions as experts in certain areas.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, and it kind of relates a little bit to this, that the next, kind of tech wave, the next, inflection point is digital, being digital and
Yep.
really, so how would you, and I think that's, part of his, question as well is how do you become flexible? I mean, you can't really be flexible if you don't have that kind of digital underpinning. How does Workfront kind of define digital? What does digital mean, and how does it make companies more flexible?
Yeah, well, I think thinking about business processes in a digital fashion, how do your business processes work? When I think about marketing, like what part of marketing isn't digital today?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, the person has a digital marketing title. Well, that's fascinating. Like everything's digital
Yeah.
today. And so I think that we've gone through that part of the transformation. And now it's about developing those skills and understanding how digital tactics are working for each one of our businesses and doing test and learn. So there's a lot of things that we're doing today inside of Workfront that we'll test and they won't work. And that's okay. And then you apply a different test and you do it a different way, and something is going to work. And so having that test and learn mentality actually helps drive that agility, because you're constantly learning. And that's one of the benefits of digital marketing, is that we can test and learn.
Yeah. Well, and that's the innovation culture, right? If you're
Mhm.
not willing to fail, then you're not going to innovate. You're
Exactly.
never going to try it out. You're never going to fail. And I think that's part of being successful, even for us individually in our
Yep.
careers, right? You have got to
Yep.
push the envelope a little bit so you know where your boundaries are.
Yep.
Okay. Next question. Do you think marketing jobs will become more remote? How is living in a different state? How is it living in a different state than your company?
Yes, I think they will continue to be remote opportunities. I think it creates more flexibility in the work environment, to hire the best talent, regardless of where they're located. I think that's going to continue. I think that is going to become the new normal. I will share, at Workfront, I was the first remote marketing employee. And coming in as CMO and being remote, everyone thought, how's this going to work?
Yeah.
She's not going to be in the office every day. But really, we developed a culture that, leveraged the technology that was available to us, that now all of us are using every single day. We used Zoom all the time before COVID. And so the transition to being 100% remote as a remote employee was awesome, because it created a level playing field. And so I do believe that, um, that marketing roles can be remote, and and that it's about hiring the right talent regardless of where they're physically located.
Yeah.
And that was my belief prior to COVID, and certainly, has made it easier transitioning to a remote workforce. Now, I miss being in the Lehigh office. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
We had food truck Fridays, and there's a whole bunch of things that I miss, even as a remote employee. Um, and I miss, physically being with my coworkers for meetings and all of those things. But it did make that transition much easier.
So how do you then, because I think a lot of companies, especially tech companies, kind of establish the ping pong table in the middle of the room, or the basketball court at Qualtrics, or whatever it might be, that kind of kind of develops a little bit of that in-house culture, and makes it a fun place to go work. How has that evolved now? And does it change the culture of a company a little bit, or do you have to evolve the culture a little bit to be able to adjust to a kind of COVID environment and remote environment?
I think post COVID, that remote work is more accepted. And we know, we just did a huge, like, global experiment that said we can still be productive if we're working from our homes.
Mhm.
So I think we've proved that out. Where I think the new normal will be is, it's still important for us to get together in person and to have that camaraderie, that collaboration, that human connection, whether it be around the basketball court, the ping pong table, at Food Truck Fridays. I do think that's going to come back. But I think the ability to be more flexible about where you work is going to increase exponentially. And there's more of an acceptance of the ability to continue to be productive and get the job done. And we have all the tools today and infrastructure to support that, given what's happened during COVID.
How have customers accepted that? Right? Customers are very used to being, visited, and, to do projects on site and that type of thing. Have your customers adjusted pretty well to this as well? And do you think that continues beyond?
I think you still miss that human connection. And at the same time, um, the technologies that we have, leveraging video in this fashion, for example, still does allow for collaboration, connection, communication. Really, we haven't seen as big of an impact as you might imagine. It's really more missing being in person. So, like we said, I would love to do this in person,
Yeah.
sitting, in the same room, but we can still do it,
Right.
even though we have, leveraging video as the enabler.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, um, first of all, or lastly, I guess, thank you very much for doing this with us. It's been very
Absolutely.
insightful. You're obviously incredibly successful, and we can learn a lot from you and your experience. Where does your career take you now? what does success look like for you? And what do you see kind of the future of your career being? Not that you haven't evolved to the ultimate place, but if you kind of said, what does success look like? What would it be?
From my standpoint, I love being an operational CMO. It's what I do. I love that. I also have, uh, as I mentioned, joined a public company board. And so the opportunity to be exposed to different businesses in a board role is something that I'll continue to pursue going forward. When I have a full-time operational role, like my role at Workfront, I really only can do one public board.
Right.
And, but I'm really enjoying that and having exposure to a different business and to be able to advise, but also learn. And for me, it's about continuous learning. And, but that's where I see myself evolving career-wise.
That's great. That's great. I can tell you it is quite rewarding to get involved in other companies, and it's hard to do it in a full-time role. But so another question came in that I'll pass along. So how do you keep your employees motivated in this ever-changing COVID circumstance and how it affects their personal life? And just a little something to add to that. I find it quite interesting now. Ordinarily you're calling a call center and you hear other call center people in the background. Now you hear kids crying or something in the background. And we've just come to accept that. It seems normal. We're just rolling with it, right? And it's creating a new opportunities for parents to be able to work from home and work remotely. But I guess how do you keep the employees motivated when they're used to one thing and now they're doing something else? And I loved your what we started with, that they didn't see kind of your costume contest. Yeah.
So we're having a costume contest and I do have my costume here, although I chose not to wear it. So I can't wear my glasses and my costume. But, we're trying to do different things to engage folks. It is hard, depending on individual situations. Working from home in some cases has been extremely challenging for folks. And so being mindful of that, being flexible with that. One of the things that I'm doing that I actually did earlier this morning, and I love it, is I do once a week, I try and do open office hours where I just get on a video. And if people want to join me and tell a story about what happened with their dog yesterday or a challenge maybe that they're having at work, and we just have a conversation. And it's always different folks that take that time and they'll pop in and ask a question or, share a story, and just to take that time to chat, because we sort of miss that, where we're all in meetings back to back to back, and it's all business all the time. You miss the time spent around the water cooler, for example. And so trying to create ways to do that and to have fun I will tell you, some of the marketing teams at Workfront have done costume contests over the course of the last couple of days. It's unbelievable, the creativity, not just with physical costumes, but backgrounds has been fun. Yeah. And so finding ways to connect with people, I agree wholeheartedly, like being in someone's home and having kids, dogs, cats, be part of the conversation has allowed me to learn more about folks on my team that I probably wouldn't have known if I had just spent time with them in a physical office. And our acceptance of that has gone way up. Yeah. And looking for ways to continue to do that. And I love having the 2-year-old accidentally come into mom's office and in getting up from her nap, and it's great. You feel like you're part of that work-life balance that everyone's trying to do.
It becomes kind of that work-life integration. It's all happening together. I love the story you told about, the cooking class that you guys did virtually. Yeah. I thought that was really interesting to see other people cooking in their kitchen, in their homes.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten so used to being in people's, home office space, wherever that might be. But we did a cooking class with a chef, and we were all going to cook. So we were in each other's kitchens, and that felt crazy personal, because generally folks aren't working in their kitchen. And so it was a cool experience, and really showed that you can demonstrate that personal side and create those personal connections, even when we're limited to doing it virtually.
That's great. Well, Heidi, thank you very much. It's been very insightful. Great to have Workfront here in Utah. Great to see the success of the company. Wish you all the best as a company and for you individually. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled to be a part of it and appreciate you inviting me.
Okay, thank you. And thanks all. Have a great weekend. Glad you joined us today. Thanks.